Hello everyone, and welcome to my channel. This channel is for educational purposes, and we check out great theories of everything, all-encompassing theories, grand unified theories or shattering discoveries, magnum opuses and tour de forces. And they mainly emanate from obscure sources. And this is our 197th video that we've done on what is called the Reciprocal Church. We're trying to put together spiritual resources that you might be able to draw upon syncretically in order to reconstruct a spiritual life for yourself, or construct for the first time a spiritual life for yourself based on things that you can actually trust, as we start to recognize that our religious books are leading us astray and are clearly fraudulent. And so we try to expose that and then come up with alternatives. Really come up with the alternatives before we expose it. So many alternative spiritual methods have been presented in the last 197 episodes, 196, and a few more are in the offing, but in the last maybe 2 months, month and a half, we've been focused on a New Testament decode. So figuring out what's really going on with the New Testament, I believe, according to my research, that the New Testament is a clear and obvious psyop written by the Romans, the Caesars, particularly those of the Flavian dynasty from 69 to 96 AD. And they did so in order to mellow out the Jews, who were constantly insurrecting in their empire, in Palestine in particular. And so they created a Jesus who was a Prince of Peace, one who believed in turning the other cheek and in rendering unto Caesar what is Caesar's, to walk an extra mile with the Romans' pack and to praise the Roman soldiers for their great faith. And hopefully they felt like this message would take hold among the Jews, and they would stop with their constant revolting from their rule. Now, we're going to look at a new text today, which is from Abelard Reuchlin. I don't know exactly if that's how you pronounce his name. That is Reuchlin. And this dates from way back in 1979. And this is called The True Authorship of the New Testament. And he cites sources here, but this is pretty much just a straight flood of his opinions on these things. He doesn't really back all of it up, but this is good to see this, especially when you compare it with what Joseph Atwill has written, and also with Michael Menescot's. And we're going to be getting his book, I believe, tomorrow, and so we'll be digging into that on this show as well. But this is it's a short pamphlet, and he just lays it out. This man did the research, particularly by reading a lot of the ancient sources, especially Josephus, obviously, but then also Tacitus and Pliny. And not only Pliny's natural history, but also his letters, private letters, and a lot of Tacitus's work. And I believe he looked at some of the Cicero material. Cicero was originally Nero's tutor, and then Nero had him executed for um, suspecting him for whatever, a palace coup or whatever. And he gets into a section here that's a lot of numerology, and I think we're going to skip that, but we're going to look at the rest of it and tell me what you think. This doesn't mean that I endorse this. This is just food for thought, and it is points of view that you probably haven't heard. So this section, the whole thing is called the True Authorship of the New Testament, and the first section is called Why We Welcome You to the Inner Circle. The Inner Circle, or Inner Ring, is the most exclusive club in history. It has consisted of those religious, political, and literary leaders having knowledge of the great secret that the Calpurnius Piso family, P-I-S-O, I believe that's pronounced Piso, of ancient Rome. So this guy was kind of a player behind the scenes of the Roman emperors, and one of the wealthy aristocrats, part of the Roman court. Calpurnius Piso family of ancient Rome created the fictional Jesus, the New Testament, the Church, and Christianity. In welcoming the general public to this knowledge, the following introduction is appropriate. Originally, this explanation was designed solely for Jews, for the purpose of preventing their conversion to Christianity. It was not intended for Christians nor other non-Jews. No exclusivism was intended, rather concern for the faith of others. The purpose of this booklet was to inform Jewish Christians and Jewish Jews of the true account of the creation of Christianity. In the 1st century AD, Jews were 10% of the population of the Roman Empire. Today, after 1900 years of suffering, persecution, forced conversion, exiling, murder, and finally the Holocaust, the Jews are but 1/4 of 1% of the world's population. And today, Jews are being attacked by modern versions of the age-old problems. Firstly, there are a number of groups of what is called Messianic Jews, or Hebrew Christians, or completed Jews, whose leaders are engaged in the twofold business of, one, collecting money from Christians, their churches, and their Christian organizations, and two, using the money thus collected to evangelize the more confused and or unsophisticated of their Jewish brethren into changing their religious affiliation to become Christians. Secondly, still today, other Christian groups continue to manipulate their readers and listeners by preaching hatred toward Jews. Christians is in quotes there. Some attack Jews by attacking the state of Israel. They claim the Holocaust was a lie created by Jews to justify Israel. They continuously present the account of the 1967 wartime attack on the USS Liberty with their cry of Jewish conspiracy. Other groups claim that they, white Christian Americans, are somehow descended from the northern 10 tribes who were carried off by Assyria in 720 BC, and that they, and not Jews, are modern-day Israel, and that Jews are satanic rejectors of Christ and have no right to exist. All this is done in the name of Christ, while the money continues pouring in. Well, I have to say that I think a lot of that stuff on there is pretty much true, but he doesn't really talk about the Khazarian aspect. I don't know how the Assyria, 720 BC, the northern 10 tribes carried off by Assyria in 720 BC. I'm not sure what that relevance is. And then he says, and they, and not Jews, are modern day Israel. Well, modern day Israel, I believe, is mainly the Khazarians. And I don't know if they are descended from those people in Assyria. I mean, they come from not really the same area, Ukraine, as opposed to, way over in Babylon or beyond Babylon. So anyway, this hatred toward Jews seems reasonable to many only because 1900 years of stereotyping Jews has conditioned popular thinking to its acceptance. The hatred was deliberately created by the authors of the New Testament, as this booklet shows. Thirdly, our Arab cousins have seized upon the worldwide negative image of the Jews to likewise manipulate for power. They and their communist friends dominate the UN so that it spends 50% of its total time attacking Israel by every conceivable excuse. Perhaps. Many Christians, as well as Jews, have wondered at this continued manipulation of hatred. Christians have also wondered at just why the Jews did reject Jesus. They have doubted the Jesus story, but there were no answers available for their questions. Many have been clearly pleased to obtain and read this explanation. Therefore, it is to seekers of truth of all possible persuasions that we respectfully submit the information in this booklet. Unfortunately, in my opinion, the joke is on him, because if he's falling back on being a Jew as opposed to a Christian, that means that he hasn't gone back far enough, because he would recognize that the New Testament is a psyop, but so is the Old Testament. And it goes just back further. In my opinion, I would just say that the only legitimate part of the Old Testament is like the first chapter of Genesis, up until God with a small g comes to replace God with a big G, which is somewhere, I think, in the second chapter of Genesis. It might even be in the first chapter. I can't remember, but I'll check. Okay, now it says, praise Piso. Piso is the guy who apparently, he said, has written the Gospels and really the whole New Testament, him and his family. But that also Piso, this guy, what's his name? Calpurnius Piso, he is also Josephus. So he wrote under the name of Josephus. Okay, a challenging proposal. If any group or person should feel its sincerity and or honesty is being unfairly attacked by this booklet, or should wish to challenge this thesis, we stand ready to publicly debate on the issues: A, the actual authorship of the New Testament, and B, the proof that leaders know this great secret and use this information, which is code, in their writings. Okay, that's the end of the introduction. Now, this is chapter 1, called The Great Secret. The New Testament, the Church, and Christianity were all the creation of Calpurnius Piso and Calpurnius Piso family, who were Roman aristocrats. The New Testament and all the characters in it, Jesus, all the Josephs, all the Marys, all the disciples, apostles, Paul, and John the Baptist, are all fictional. Now, I'd like to see what he would have to say about the Dead Sea Scrolls, because the Dead Sea Scrolls at least have a skeleton of that same kind of story, with the teacher of righteousness, the wicked priest, and the liar, and certainly the Pisos didn't write the Dead Sea Scrolls, because the Dead Sea Scrolls are written in Hebrew primarily, whereas the Gospels are written in Greek. So if he's saying that Romans wrote the Gospels, well, they definitely didn't write the Dead Sea Scrolls. We'll see where he goes, because certainly he must know about the Dead Sea Scrolls, because this is 1979, although he maybe didn't have access to them. But I believe he wrote a follow-up on this from like 2003. So hopefully we will find that out eventually. The Pisos created the story and the characters. They tied the story into a specific time and place in history, and they connected it with some peripheral actual people, such as the Herods, Gamaliel, the Roman procurators, etc. But Jesus and everyone involved with him were created, that is, fictional characters. In the middle of the 1st century of the present era, Rome's aristocracy felt itself confronted with a growing problem. The Jewish religion was continuing to grow in numbers, adding ever more proselytes. Jews numbered more than 8 million and were 10% of the population of the empire and 20% of that portion living east of Rome. Approximately half or more of the Jews lived outside Palestine, of which many were descended from proselytes, male and female. However, Judaism's ethics and morality were incompatible with the hallowed Roman institution of slavery, on which the aristocracy fed, lived, and ruled. I wouldn't say that that is the main incompatibility, but one of them maybe. They feared that Judaism would become the chief religion of the empire. The Roman author Aeneas Seneca, tutor and confidant of Emperor Nero, suggested in a letter to his friend Lucilius, a pseudonym of Lucius Piso, that lighting candles on Sabbaths be prohibited. Seneca is later quoted by St. Augustine in his City of God, although the quotation does not exist in Seneca's extant writings, as charging that, quote, "The Sabbath customs of that most accursed nation have gained such strength that they have been now received in all lands. The conquered have given laws to the conqueror." The family, that's an end of the quote. The family headed by Seneca's friend Lucius Piso was confronted with an allied problem more personal to it. They were the Calpurnius Pisos, who were descended from statesmen and consuls, and from great poets and historians as well. Gaius Lucius Calpurnius Piso, the leader of the family, had married Arria the Younger from her grandfather's name Aristobulus, who was one of the Herods, if I'm not mistaken, back in the 1st century BC, early 1st century BC, I believe, maybe middle of 1st century. This made Lucius Piso's wife the great-granddaughter of Herod the Great. Okay, so the Pisos married into the Herod family by marrying Arria, granddaughter of Aristobulus. And so Aristobulus was the son of Herod. This made Lucius Piso's wife the great-granddaughter of Herod the Great. Repeatedly, religious-minded Judean zealots were staging insurrections against the Herodian rulers of Judea, who were Piso's wife's relations. Piso wished to strengthen his wife's family control of the Judeans. The Pisos searched for a solution to the two problems. They found it in the Jewish holy books. which were the foundation both for the rapid spread of the religion and for the zealots' refusal to be governed by Rome's puppets. The Pisos mocked, but marveled at, the Jewish belief in their holy books. Therefore, they felt a new Jewish book would be the ideal method to pacify the Judeans and strengthen their in-laws' control of the country. About the year 60 A.D., Lucius Calpurnius Piso composed Ur Marcus, the first version of the Gospel of Mark, which no longer exists. He was encouraged by his friend Seneca and assisted by his wife's kinsman, the young Perseus, the poet. I wish he would tell us how he knows that. Nero's mistress, later his wife Poppaea, was pro-Jewish, and Nero opposed the plan. Nero was the emperor at the time. The result was the Pisonian conspiracy to assassinate Nero. So they were really willing to kill Nero in order to propagate this plan. So the Pisonian conspiracy to assassinate Nero, detailed in the historian Tacitus. And that's, I believe, his book Annals, which I'm definitely going to read. I think I read it when I was in like 4th grade. I read part of it, but probably didn't understand it that well in context. But I think they have you read these things just so that you're somewhat familiar with it. And I mean, I was in a private school at the time, so I think they, just so you know how to pronounce the name and stuff like that. So you sound like you're kind of literate about some of this stuff, even though it goes completely over your head. But this attempt failed. So the assassination attempt failed when he aborted the plot. Piso. I guess Lucius. Instead, Nero had Piso and Seneca and their fellow conspirators executed by forcing them to commit suicide. He exiled Piso's young son Arius, who appears in Tacitus under several names, including Antonius Natalis. Nero sent young Piso to Syria as governor. That post also gave him command of the legions controlling Judea. His own history records his service in Judea. So I guess Arius Piso has a history. His own history records, history is in quotes, by the way, his own history records his service in Judea in the year 65 under the name of Gessius Florus, and in 66 with the pseudonym Cestius Gallus. I believe that is actually Josephus then, because this is the point in time where Josephus appears in his Wars of the Jews, and he appears on the scene as one of the Jewish generals fighting in the War of the Jews, which began in 66 AD. And Josephus was born in 37 AD. When he surrendered, he said, "I was about 30. So that must have happened in approximately 67 BC. But that is also a shout out or a marker code, because that's exactly what Jesus did. He showed up on the scene when he was about 30. Thus, Arius Calpurnius Piso deliberately provoked the Jewish revolt in 66 so he could destroy the temple in Jerusalem. For the Jews were unwilling to accept his father's story and thereby become pacified by it as was intended. So I don't know where he's getting this information I wish there is a footnote there, which I will look at. But so he's saying that Calpurnius Piso provoked the Jewish revolt because he was upset that the Jews were unwilling to accept his father's story. His father was the guy who wrote the original book of Mark 5 years earlier. I doubt that doesn't strike me as really making that much sense. Doesn't mean it's not true, but I'm going to put a little bit of a red flag there. However, his 12th Legion, now I believe he could have provoked the Jewish revolt because he hated Jews, or, you know, because he was greedy for power or whatever, but I don't know about because the Jews were unwilling to accept his father's story. That's kind of putting the New Testament kind of in the cart before the horse a little bit. However, his 12th Legion was caught by the Zealots in the pass of Beth Horon and almost lost. Nero's reaction was to exile him instead to Pannonia, to command a legion there, and to send Mucianus to serve in Syria, and Vespasian to Judea to put down the Jewish revolt. Then, in 68, Nero was assassinated by his own slave, Epaphroditus. And this is a very interesting character, Epaphroditus. I didn't realize that he was Nero's slave. I thought he was like Nero's assistant. But he apparently, according to this, he was his slave. And he stayed on. He was eventually assassinated or murdered by Domitian like 30 years later in 95 or 96 AD. And so he was behind the scenes the whole time. And Josephus dedicates his, I believe, both of his books to Epaphroditus. And I believe he also appears in the Gospels. The character Epaphroditus has a cameo appearance in either the book of Acts or the book of, or in one of the Gospels. Okay, so, but he's saying that Nero was assassinated by his own slave Epaphroditus, who, unknown to his master, was young Piso's lackey. So this guy was apparently Josephus's lackey, because Josephus is young Piso. So then when Nero was assassinated, Galba became emperor and named Piso's cousin Lucianus Piso as his intended successor. But Galba in turn was soon overthrown by Otho. Otho was then overthrown by Vitellius, at which point Piso and his friends began to flock together against Vitellius. The Pisos and Vespasian and Mucianus and Tiberius Alexander, who was Philo's nephew, a Jew, all joined ranks behind Vespasian to seek to overthrow Vitellius. This all happened in 68 and 69 AD. Arrius Calpurnius Piso was still commanding the 7th Legion in Pannonia, which is Austria-Hungary, and Vespasian sent him, now appearing in Tacitus with the name Marcus Antonius Primus. This guy tracked all the aliases by looking at Pliny's private letters. Apparently, if you read closely Pliny's private letters, you can kind of sort out all these aliases that the various Pisos used throughout the century where they were doing this. Okay, so Tacitus, who's also, an agent of all this, he gives him the name Marcus Antonius Primus, south across, and they identify themselves by number a lot also. south across the Alps to overthrow Vitellius. Meanwhile, the main body of Vespasian's legions marched overland under Mucianus from the east toward Rome. Piso succeeded in defeating Vitellius's army and secured Rome for Vespasian. Mucianus arrived and promptly sent Piso, to Judea to help Titus at the siege of Jerusalem. He did so, and in 70 AD, they assaulted the city, then the temple, burned it, slaughtered many thousands, sent thousands more to slavery, and gladiatorial combat and death. They also plundered the temple and basically built the Roman Colosseum with the booty, which was the venue for all the gladiatorial combat and death. So the Jews were sold into slavery in order to build the Colosseum with the riches that were plundered from their temple, and then they had to participate as the gladiators in the Colosseum's entertainment. Then Arius Calpurnius Piso wrote in sequence the following: 70-75 AD, Gospel of Matthew. 75 to 80 AD, present Gospel of Mark. So he reworked Mark from 75 to 80 AD. And 85 to 90 AD, Gospel of Luke, with help of Pliny the Younger, who I believe was just a nephew of Pliny the Elder. Pliny the Elder is the one who wrote the natural history, and so you're citing a lot of Pliny he uses a lot of Pliny the Elder, but it was Pliny the Younger that was participating in writing the Gospels. Pliny the Elder died in Vesuvius in 79 AD. So, that rules him out pretty much, except that he could have participated in maybe Mark and Matthew. But Pliny the Younger was actually the husband of Piso's granddaughter, I believe. In the gospel story, okay, I believe we're out of time. We'll start up here, and we're going to at least get into this a little bit more. There's a lot here. Take it all with a grain of salt, but probably take it, because there's something to definitely think about. Okay, thanks for tuning in today.